Going with Rogue Deck Builder / Gonro Games. Don't know which channel this will end up on, but I thought I'd give the conclusion to my decks from the Strixhaven Commander League. Now, I am a negative Nancy, first one to admit. I'm a Debbie Downer. I am just full of toxicity when it comes to talking about Magic the Gathering and how much I have a love-hate relationship for this game. However, a format that I do love to play, which I think just hits the sweet spot for me, is basically a brewer and as a more limited player, is what we call Commander League. I've done videos about this in the past, but the TLDR on it is we started with a set booster box of Strixhaven and then added a pack per week, plus every 3 losses you're allowed to add a pack. That keeps it more competitive. And over the course of the, I think it was 6 weeks, from Strixhaven to Forgotten Realms, we played weekly, sometimes more than once a week, of a Commander format, building cards out of all the limited amount of packs that we opened. So I'll have to do a bigger overview on how it works. So I'll have to show you some of the scorecards. I think Talmadge hid my scorecards because I was bragging about it and showing my win-loss record for it, and they burnt it, I think, those punks. Anyway, we did a video either on this channel or on the Gonro Games channel. If you're not a subscriber to Gonro Games, go ahead and find it and subscribe to it. We post a lot of content there as well about how it started out and kind of the evolution of them. So I'm just going to show you some of the decks that I made. And what I liked about this is it actually became quite tuned by the end. And again, it hits the sweet spot for me because I think Commander is trash. I'll just put it out there. I'll be the person to say that the Commander format is trash in 2021. The cards are way too broken. Everything's too pushed. I mean, they're even banning things like Hull Breacher, which is just, I mean, if you want to ban cards, there are so many cards. There's 20, 30, 40 cards that probably should be banned from that trash format. I get it. You can kind of keep everyone in check if they're running more broken cards, then it is what it is. But I mean, a lot of the mana acceleration, mana rock type, like Soul Ring type cards, I think are just oftentimes a plague for the game because one person just snowballs out of control. Well, I could get in it, and I'm not going to in this video. Let's just say, for, to each his own, I do not like playing Commander. I especially do not like playing Commander after their precons tend to have the most push broken cards in them, kind of forcing you to buy into them. And one of the main reasons that I can't stand brewing in Commander is it feels like I use the exact same, after lands and the exact same staples, you're left with maybe 15 flex cards per Commander. So it doesn't even feel that different. I built like a Teysa Orzhov Scion deck, and then I went to build a Liliana deck, and I was using literally almost all the exact same cards. At least in black, it was oh, gotta throw all these cards into this deck. And every time I tried to like brew other cards, like, oh, a zombie card would work good in this slot because the line works with zombies. Nope, this other card's just strictly better than even trying to go that route. Anyway, again, it's a rant for another day. I'm great at ranting. Maybe I'll have to do that for a Rogue Rant Builder day of talking about how much I hate Commander because of how solved it's become. Anyway, Commander League, though, has been really fun because you have to work with what you open, but it's enough. It's not like one of the other formats I don't like. I'm just going to talk in this video about how I don't like anything in Magic. I don't like Sealed. I absolutely do not like Sealed because I feel like Sealed is too limited, that you're just, like, pre-releases, I'll play them, but I don't really enjoy building sealed decks as much as drafting. Like drafting, I think I have a lot more power over my own destiny than I do with sealed. But sealed leagues are always fun because you have more and more to work with, and eventually the brewer, eventually the fine tuner, eventually the deck builder is going to have an advantage over just kind of the luck of the 6 packs that you get out of a pre-release sealed. So this one hits the sweet spot with me. I get to play Commander. I get to play a kind of a dumbed down, the power level much lower, and you get to progressively work towards something. That's why I like leagues. It feels like being a new player again, to where you have a brand new collection and you have to work with the cards you have. You don't have an unlimited budget to go and just splurge. I'm a little kid again with getting excited every week to go open up my new pack to see what I can get from my deck. So reminds me of when I was a little kid with my allowance and take my allowance money, or what I used to do is starve myself. So my parents would give me $2. See, this is how old I am. You guys can see what a boomer I am. Is my parents used to give me $2 a day for lunch, because that's how much school lunch cost, was $2. And instead of eating school lunch, I would just starve. I would like sneak a sandwich or an apple or something like that from home, and I'd save the $2 a day, and then I'd go buy Magic cards with it instead. And so it kind of feels like that, where you're kind of forced to work with on a budget onto a limited amount of stuff. So anyway, I haven't showed this one. I'm going to kind of go through the decks of where I ended up with. This one was one of my late additions here. I ended up with 3 different decks. This is Lisette, Dean of the Root. I mean, you hardly ever cast it on the Valentine side, but it does give you access, since Valentine is on the other side, that his commander identity is black and green. So it allows me to go to kind of a green lifelink. I think this is one of the stronger commanders out of Strixhaven. What we saw in our league was we had a lot of Jodsies, lots of Jodsies, because Jodsies is very powerful. We had quite a few Exituses, which I built both of those as well, and we had a lot of Belladros. Those were kind of the boogeyman commanders. But Lisette ended up being pretty fun, because Lisette actually is one of these cards that makes bad cards better. So I'll show you some of the cards that end up being actually pretty good in this deck. So the name of the game was just anything that gains life and go wide. And there were a lot of cards that worked really, really well in this type of stuff in Strixhaven. So you start off with our Commander League, you can start off with 4 of each card, and then every 10 packs you have to cut down to 3, then 2, then 1, and then eventually you have a Commander deck at the very end of the league. And so it is kind of fun, because you're playing with mostly Strixhaven cards at the first league, and then you start to branch off and then be like, okay, well, my deck could really, really use, this set probably has cards that will work good with it. So you do get to taste most of the flavors from Strixhaven. Like, you get most of by buying a set booster. And we also do allow like pre-release or drafts or anything that is done in store. You can actually add that to your Commander League. And so you at the first couple weeks you're playing mostly Strixhaven, and then it really starts to branch off. So this one wanted to work around life gain. So even cards like the Witherbloom Pledge Mage got really good, because every instant sorcery spell equaled put a +1 as a counter on everything. I'll just kind of like go through some of these cards here. First was Zoomancy did 2 things. It had a go wide, plus with the pest died. Troubles Now. This one was kind of cool because you can gain a life. Of course you want to do that. Of course you want your usual suspects. You get some list cards out of the set booster that ends up being pretty good. Had a little Proliferate from Modern Horizons. Same thing, drawing cards for each +1 counter. Like, these are cards you would never see play in Commander unless you really want to be bad and play these cards. I know if you go to EA Trick, like, well, Kevin, this card actually does see Commander play. It's like, yeah, but there's strictly better cards that would go in this slot. Typically, this actually just tutored up a card that I got out of, maybe we'll come across it here. I don't want to make this video be like 9 million years long, but it tutored up the Aftermath card from the good old Amonkhet. Is literally what it did. This is only option in here. Now I can't even find the stupid card. I think I passed through it. We'll get to it when it gets it, but this Lore Mage is kind of cool. Can tutor up a specific card and put in your graveyard. Or the Bookworm. Bookworm is another one, a great tutor up, put in your graveyard, and then it gives you some distance here. So should have come more prepared here and actually separated this. Of course, Ramp is always good. Kind of got this cool little Orden Wreath of Vastwood that allows them to enter with counters with it. So this had kind of a +1 counter, proliferate type strategy, plus it did have life gain. Cram Session was really good because it went and got Pest Swarm or Environmental Sciences. Those are allowed in your sideboard, because your sideboard is everything that you've pulled for League, so you can actually have tutorable stuff. So Cram Session can go get Environmental Sciences, which gains you 2 life. This one gained you 4 life, so that's two instances of triggers. And then, or it could go get the Pest Summonings usually, or there's even the Destroy an Artifact or Enchantment that gain life or put Pests into play. Good old Cultivate. That was what's cool about Strixhaven, is a lot of these cards worked really well for Commander. I got a Seraph out of one of the things we allow is, this came out of the promo packs that Wizard sends out for events, and so once per week too we give these out and they can be added. So this was actually a pretty good pull with Seraph. Good little board wipe. Should have used this as my actual Commander, but I wanted to keep it Strixhaven theme. Agreed. That one's cool, of course, with life gain strategy to then draw cards. These cards end up being really, really good in the Commander. I mean, as far as when you really tone down the power level, instant speed removal, that's actually a lot more rare than you'd think in these type of formats. A lot of things has been sorcery speed lately because Mark Rosewater does not like us to interact with each other, so at least not at instant speed. So anyway, Bake of the Pies is instant speed, destroy a creature plus created food token. So it kind of does 2 things. For one, it gets rid of a problematic card that your opponent is attacking you with, and then gives you a food token, and then crack to then give all your creatures +1/+1 counter. Verdant Catacomb I ended up pulling out of this. I need to switch that out because I've kind of made these budget. Mortality Spear, just a flexible removal spell. Turok Dread Cantor, because it was just worked with +1 from counters, plus a pretty good card. This is another one. So the Orchard Strider out of Modern Horizons You'll see a lot of Modern Horizons cards in this list because we did do a pre-release of Modern Horizons and it was eligible for this league to be added into. This one had created 2 food tokens, so I think a card like this would be absolutely worthwhile to cast for 6 mana and have 2 instances of food tokens. Field Trip's fine to go learn. This is one of the strongest cards that I was able to pull, the Veto Thorn of the Dusk Roses out of a Jumpstart pack. Yes, Jumpstart is legal, so our collector's editions, if you'd like to purchase those as packs, we do allow them. Whenever you gain that life, target opponent loses that much life, and then creatures can lifelink. It really works incredibly well with Lisette, Dean of the Root. It can be a finisher, plus it can be, it really just is a finisher at that point with the lifelink, and then having opponents lose life. Smell Fear, just proliferate and fight. Gives you 2 for 1, basically. Proliferates all your +1/+1 counters plus a fight. Then we have the Herd Baloth. Whenever you put a +1 counter on it, you get a 4/4 beast, so that really helps with the go wide. So this deck really didn't get good till the Modern Horizons was introduced to it. This one's actually pretty good. We're sacrificing pest tokens and gaining 2 life. Very good card with the Vermin Gorger. We infuse with Vitality, gaining life mainly on here, and getting back a threat that has been killed. Plume of the Forbidden, great way to kill those pest tokens and draw a bunch of cards. The Silver Smoke Ghoul, it works with gaining life and sacrificing to draw cards, so it worked well. This was out of a Jumpstart as well. And the Eternal Thirst, this was kind of a fun one to put on a Trampler, and it got pretty big, and it did also give lifelink, so this one basically did all you wanted it to in this deck. See these fun cards? These are fun cards that you would never play in regular Commander. Good little Ordeal of Nylea, because oftentimes you could just equip it or enchant it, and they'd already have counters on them, so you'd be able to ramp up pretty nicely. Things like Undercity's Embrace, just by gaining the 4 life. Again, it's kind of a 2 for 1 effect. The Dust Shell Crawler, when it enters battlefield, put a +1 on it, and it gives everything trample. This was crucial, actually. This card was really good for giving all the creatures trample. I mean, it was a little bit redundant because every time a creature, a +1 counter did get put on a creature, but oftentimes Lisette was just killed pretty quickly, and so this was another way to give things trample. Now, Professor got the Learn on top of it, so you get a creature, plus you get like an Environmental Sciences to gain some life. The Blood Host, this one was also pretty good because you could sacrifice creatures to gain 2 life. And then we have a Castle Locked-Twain, of course, that's pretty good. Probably one of the more powerful cards in the deck was the Tenured Ink Caster. And so it put a +1 counter on something, and whenever creature you control with a +1 counter attacks, each opponent loses 1 life. So when you're going super, super wide, these two are really good together because not only do you get a lot of life gain instances, but then, they work perfectly together. These are just a match made in heaven for these 2 cards because then you're going to be gaining life, but then adds instant speed on the stack triggers that allow you to then add more counters, which then are going to be harder to block with the trample. Oftentimes this would be the way to get it that turn. I wouldn't have trample yet, so to attack with this, and then we'd be able to gain life from the +1/+1 counters, and then put more +1 counters on our creatures, and then they gain trample. Good old Fertilid. This one's kind of neat because the more counters you can put on it, the more instances of gaining or of grabbing cards you would get. Of course, more learn basic lands. More learn cards. The Pestilence Cauldron really good because you can discard cards to get a pest, or basically, what else can you do here? Each opponent mills cards equal to the amount of life you've gained this turn. That wasn't really it. It's really his Pestilence Cauldron was good for. What was the backside of this stupid thing even do? Was that what I was using it for? This one's actually pretty good too because you return up to 2 dark creature, land or planeswalker cards from your graveyard to your hand. Each player gains 4 life, but you gaining life is much more important. Got some nice little dual lands going on. This is another one, Giant Opportunity. It really, really terrible in regular Commander, but creating 3 food tokens gives you 3 instances of gaining life, which is really good with Lisette. Tendrils of Agony, this one's pretty good to storm off for a couple, just even once is fine, but storming off multiple times gives you multiple triggers. Late game with a lot of mana, this can actually really come in effect. Dry Keeper I decided to keep in this deck because it just put out 3 guys for 1, and for going wide and putting multiple counters on it, I thought it was one of the better cards. Did have Professor's Warning to keep my guy alive. Ill-Gotten Inheritance, in all honesty, probably didn't need to be in here, but it was just being for upkeep, gaining life once per turn, and then being able to get the counters is pretty good. There we go. Definitely, that was the card that I often like to tutor for with the Lore Mage, because then it all creatures must block target creature. So a lot of times this would finish off the game versus one opponent by forcing them to block one pest and everything else getting through. The Harvester's Soul, just a great little draw card. Outlet. Fierce Witchstalker creates a food, so again a 2 for 1. Of course, drawing cards is nice. This one's pretty good too. Great sacrifice target plus gaining life. The Ancient Animist is fine. Put a +1 counter plus fight. and Death Touch. A Lifelink is pretty good. I cut a bunch of Lifelink cards just because Lifelink wasn't really good by itself, but Death Touch Lifelink is, of course, fine. Fairhaven Elf for ramp. You have my Cradle hit off of Modern Horizons, so probably not necessary in this deck. I have a bunch of basics then here. Snakeskin Veil, of course, to protect the commander. Really fun one that I was able to open up out of Commander Legends here was the Staff of Domination. Gaining life per turn is fine, and untapping creatures is actually pretty good here. And even drawing cards is great. So late game, this can just be a pretty good house to utilize mana. Titanic Brawl, another fight card. We do need removal. It's really good on life linkers because then they fight plus gain you life. Another Pride Malkin, which gives creatures with plus 1 encounters trample, so a little bit of redundancy in here. I did include these ETB effects that just gain life. This again is another 2-for-1. You gain 2 life plus get a 3/2. Giant Skewer probably didn't want to be in here. It's kind of awkward, but you can start getting some food tokens early to then be able to sack late. Armorcraft Judge was great to draw cards with plus 1 counters. And the Feeder, fine. When it dies, each opponent loses 2 life and gain 2 life. It's kind of filler, but it's flying. Evasiveness is fine. And gaining life is fine with this card. Vindictive Vampire, another one that's really good with the sacrifice sub-theme that, well, it doesn't really have a big sub-theme, but whenever a creature you control died, you would gain the life and deal damage, which was awesome because more triggers. Putrefy. And we have, when one or more plus 1 counters are put on the Scurry Oak, yeah, Modern Horizons just love this little pairing with Strixhaven. You create green squirrel token, so it's going to continue to get more and more. Witherbloom Apprentice, of course, is really good for whenever casting Sorcery Spells, you gain a life and the opponent loses a life. And whenever you gain life, each opponent loses another life, and this had a sacrifice ability to it. And the Overgrown Archer is pretty good too because gaining a life per turn, or then sacrificing it to go learn was good. So that was that little deck. We'll showcase, maybe we'll go a little bit quicker of how it ended up. But yeah, super fun. I've actually kept these together in the past. I've just kind of sold these decks after I was done with it because they give a good starting point for people. But the power level, I'm telling you, it's like perfect. It is the gameplay experience is good. There are still a lot of people do run board wipes, they do run counter spells, they do run all that sort of stuff. But it feels more like playing Magic and less like playing wombo combo broken stuff, which is what I absolutely abhor about Commander. So anyway, well, let's kind of go through this one really quick with an Arid Mesa that's unsleeved in here for some reason. I think these are my kind of my cuts. Oh, because this one I did update. I was going to show that I cut these 2 cards for other ones that were more like, so I took out the money cards and then made it more of a budget build. So I took out the Arid Mesa and the Demonic Tutor and replaced it with something, but I did not come prepared. Oh, there's my replace card right there. I know that the Stormkeep Artist, this one eluded me. Out of all the packs I opened, I did not get a Stormkeep Artist, and Exitus absolutely wants it because you're casting a bunch of spells and it gives you mana. So Exitus I've showed before, so I'm just going to kind of go through this pretty quick and show some of the cards in here. Ended up with lots of ramp. So my strategy in this league is always to go into Commander Legends as soon as possible because I ended up with all the diamonds and an Arcane Signet, and all those can be found by Commander Legends. And Exitus is a very greedy commander. It wants lots and lots of mana. Come on, camera, focus. So it's going to want every rock in the entire universe. The next thing that Exitus wants is like discard outlets. So hardly ever use it for the Furious part, but the cool thing about Furious is it didn't kill Exitus, so I could actually wipe the board and keep my Exitus alive. And the fast part was kind of cool too with discarding card, then draw 2 cards because you do want to discard creatures. The Tormenting Voice was in here too, Thrilling Discovery, Thrill of Possibility, all the thrills, the Faithless Salvaging. We are trying to ditch those lands. We have a bit of a mill strategy with the Corpse Churn. Discerning Taste too also was a self-mill strategy. Bobble, got a more ramp here with the Milken. This one was kind of cool addition to the deck because it allows you to mill a card and add a colorless. Colorless is fine, plus the mill. The more of a toolbox of creatures in your graveyard, the better with Exitus because it gives you more options. This one's actually really cool, this Liquid Metal Torque. I had a few things that just killed artifacts as like an option on them, and I know there's a learn card that does, and this does 2 things. I think this is going to be a very, so speculators out there, I think this is going to be a commander staple going forward. By giving an online permanent, it becomes an artifact and then being able to destroy it. I know there's also one Liquid Metal Coating or something like this, so it's another additional one. This one's super good. It ramps you and it's a lot more justifiable because it can ramp and it can start turning things into artifacts, and anything that can destroy an artifact. There you go. Some lockets, those are always fine. Commander Sphere, again, another reason to go into. So this one was, okay, ignore that. That's just because I had multiple ones in different decks, and so I went and got a proxy one for it. This ended up being a pretty cool pull. I was pulling Omniket for the cycling cards, ended up getting Oldcatcher's Monument. Would have preferred Bontus, but white creature spells cost one less, so my commander attacks is already reduced now every time it dies. And whenever you cast a creature spell, you create a 1/1 warrior token, so it did give me a little ways to go wide with all the, recycling creatures. Letter Acceptance fine too with more mana ramp. Alright, so now the two most important cards that I was able to pull. These work super good with Exitus because it helps you recycle both creatures, and then you can get your spells back to get more creatures. So the return Pass Caller gets a sorcery or instant or spirit back from your graveyard, and then the Revolutionist gets back an instant or sorcery card. Plus it has Madness, so it can actually work with those like Throw Possibilities and those type of cards. So really, really cool that I was able to pull both of those. You can already see how this commander deck, I don't know what power level you'd put it at, but it's definitely fun. The mana base is kind of wonky. I opened up enough Jumpstart to find one of the Jumpstart ones. That was my strategy, was to go into Jumpstart early on. Like, okay, I probably need red cards, let's go into red. And I'm getting enough Jumpstart there. Like, in this league, you go through so many packs. Like, I'm like, wow, 40 packs? That's a ton. Nah, you lose a lot every week. I mean, it's 6 weeks of getting packs. There's 6 cards right there. You lose a lot. There's lots of promos that come in. You play in other events, and those can get added in. And so you end up having a decent little pool afterwards. So had a bunch of tap lands that worked well in this. Let's get past the boring stuff for the lands and get right on to the juicy stuff. So here's another cool one that worked with that sort of stuff, which is the Living Lightning when it died. So we do have some sacrifice outlets in here, and so return instant sorcery card when it dies. So it works like Revolutionist. This one is kind of a cute card with Wild Ricochet. Not only did I get to cast a spell to trigger Exitus, but I also got to copy a spell. So both of those will trigger Exitus, so I get 2 cards back from my graveyard, plus change the target of the spell, plus copy it. So this card was really a 4-for-1, and it led to a lot of blowouts. Speaking of a big copy one is Wandering Archaic. Every time people don't pay, you copy a spell, and copying works off Exitus, so you get back creatures. Then we have the Lava Serpent. So I opted to go these type of cards if anything has cycling. It's just not included in here because it's just ways to draw cards. This is more of a sorcery instant deck. The creatures you want to be toolboxes to get back stuff or to get a lot of card advantage. So Lava Serpent in here. The Dranith Stinger, these 1 cyclings were perfect. We have the basic land cycler for the Landscaper Colas. The Valiant Rescuer, if we get it out, we start to cycle stuff we could start getting, but usually just the cycling too. The Healer. So you can see my strategy with Ikoria with this one. I end up throwing in this Moaning Well because cycling 2 is fine. Had a couple other cyclers that I ended up cutting. One was the one that gave a Death Touch counter, and the other one was one that gave a lifelink counter. And both those would work okay with Exitus. Like lifelink double strike is fine, and so is Death Touch double strike. But I mean, it was always a chore to keep Exitus alive to begin with, and I was never attacking. How I won this game is by grinding out the opponents. Final Payment, probably one of the best cards in the deck because not only it allowed, how this stacks too is really cool because it's additional cost to cast the spell. You sacrifice a creature, so it's part of the cast. So it's already in the graveyard when this goes on the stack. So it triggers Exitus, and then Exitus can go get back the creature that you sacrificed for it. So any sort of ETB effect that you want to recycle, Final Payment was really good with. So being able to destroy a creature and get back a creature with an ETB effect was super, super strong. We have Lightning Axe, same thing. Discarding a creature card was not that bad of a thing for 5 damage. So 5 damage is easy to hold up 1 red mana to take care of a 5 damage threat, and there was a lot of them in this format, like Beledros, other Exises. Jadzi was even a 5 toughness card. Bone Shard, same thing as before. Sacrifice a creature, it's eligible. Bone Splinters, same thing. Plume of the Forbidden. This is a amazing card in this deck because you sacrifice all your creatures that are out, draw a ton of cards, and it copies the spell. So copies then gets all the instances back, which they are eligible in the graveyard. They will see them in the graveyard when these copies go off. And that way, Exitus will be able to get them back to the hand. The Pitiless Pontiff was a sacrifice outlet. Wish I would have found one more sacrifice outlet that didn't have kind of the annoying 1 cost, but this one was pretty good because it could keep itself alive, so it's something that you could count on. The Saraseer, the best sacrifice outlet that I was able to pull. Commander Legends card. Carrion Feeder, I did open up 1 Eternal Masters pack and found this sucker, so I was glad for that. Icebrown Scepter, this actually had a lot of cards you could throw on it, like probably my favorite would be Even something like Thrilling Possibility wouldn't be bad, but usually throwing like Ephemerate on here or some other that can flicker or bounce was super good on the Scepter. Pure the Volatile. This is actually a really good commander card. Really good with sacrifice outlets. If you sacrifice this guy and there was a huge board state from Belladrosses, there were a lot of Belladrosses that had just tons of pests out, you'd gain so much life. I think one game I was up to 400 plus life because of the board state with this and dealing 7 damage to each of them. And it has lifelink, so you gain life for every damage you do with this guy. This was one of my last pulls. Didn't actually get to play this much, but Sir Conrad was super good in this because leaving the graveyard counts with Exitus' ability to come back. So really cool ability. Also milling the top card of library is fine. Just super way to grind out opponents. Quintor's Field Historian was okay. Every time a card left the graveyard, it got a 3/2. But I don't know, it just felt super awkward to justify throwing Quintorius out when there were other things to do. I'd often have this card stuck in my hand. Also, it was a terrible card to mill because Exitus can't get back legendary creatures, which Corpse Churn was cool for that because then I could get back legendary creatures. A legendary creature that wasn't awful, or you could justify throwing it all the time, was Chainer. Chainer was super good because you could discard a card and then you could cast a creature spell from your graveyard. It seems a little bit redundant with Exitus, but discarding a card and then being able to cast it, this is another way to get back your legendary creatures. It worked really well. A little bit redundant, but it did work really well in the deck. Warsinger, same thing. This is a pretty good card to get back some of your creatures that you were able to get ETB effects out of. And the Velomachus Lorehold was really good too because it casts an instant sorcery spell and you get value. Rip Apart, really good. Destroy an artifact or enchantment, 3 damage, does everything you need to do. And Profane Tutor, this is a nice little tutor. Reconstruct History, pretty good. Get back artifact, creature, enchantment, land. They're usually had. I've been able to hit all of them at once. And then we also had a Baleful Mastery for a little bit of removal. We were able to open up a Vindicate from Modern Horizons. Assassin's Will. These are my 2 best cards by far. These are the ones that I'd like to recycle once I get that loop going. Was the board wipe with the Volcanic Torrent, because oftentimes you could cast a bunch of cards in one turn, and the will to both do 2 things. Graveyards were, like other Exodus decks, other ones were utilizing graveyards. This is a super good card. Makes your opponent sacrifice their biggest creature at instant speed. You get a lot of throws for sacrificing to things like Plume. Super good. Same thing with this Volcanic Torrent. With the Cascade, you get a lot of triggers off of Exitus. Got a Vanishing Verse. Can't go wrong with Vanishing Verse. Professor in Zoology. Now we're getting into the ETB stuff. Really good card with Learn. 2/1, 2 mana. Easy to die and recycle. Same thing with Eye Twitch. The Ministrant of Obligation allows basically a 3-for-1. You start getting some 1/1 counters you can chump block. The Firefinder gets you basic land. The Burnish Heart gets you, multiple basic lands. The Dragon's Rage Chandler. Ooh, that one's foily. This one's kind of cool because you get a Surveil one, so you could fill up your graveyard with a bunch of different creatures. And the best card in the deck by far, Ephemerate. This was usually hooked up to one of our ETB effects as far as getting back an instant sorcery spell. This would be a 2-for-1 basically, so you'd Ephemerate that, and then Ephemerate would come back and you target that card again, and then it would get back. So the first time you get back another instant sorcery, the second time you get back Ephemerate, and then you'd be golden. And then we have the Supernatural Stamina. This is also pretty good to then loop on like an ETB effect. So not a bad one. So this ended up being my favorite deck by far. It was just such a Kevin deck. Like really, like everything was a puzzle. I had to figure out how to beat my opponents with using the resources that I had, which is the beauty of Magic. That is when you're playing Magic the best, is this problem-solving game. And so this definitely was a problem solver. I did prefer it over the +1/+1. This was my go-to deck. This is one I played the crap out of. Jodsy I've showcased. I don't think I'm going to show too much of Jodsy. We'll just kind of flash through it. Jodsy is just pure cancer. This deck is just, the only time we play Jodsy is when we have our Jodsy offs. So if one person played Jodsy, then I'd be like, okay, then I'll play Jodsy. I'm not going to sit back and watch you a dirtle for a entire turn. This card just took forever on their turns because basically Strixhaven gave everything Jodsy needed in this deck. There were a lot of ramp, tons of ramp in Strixhaven. And so you could even justify running like a heavy land, but lots of draw and lots of ramp was in Strixhaven alone. So ended up with Modern Horizons 2 really put this over the top because it's able to get some storm cards with Chatterstorm and Ave, Presenter Ooze. But all in all, like Jodsy is the ultimate card of making bad cards or just subpar cards really, really good, because it's just really like you just need a few finishers. My finishers I decided was like Bookworm, Brynolin, the Moon, Kraken, Annoyed Altasar, some of these big stuff. Meter Golem and the Scholar of the Ages kind of looping late with like a Runaway Together or a few other ways to bounce multiple creatures per turn. Then you could just eventually shut down your opponents. You're going to get so much value. There was my MVP of my deck by far. Copying Beladros was insane with Jodsy, but there's my other MVP with the Primeval Bounty, because every time you cast something, Jodsy's casting a ton of stuff. So this one was kind of fun though, but it wasn't fun for our other opponents because it was anything but being, interacting. You were just trying to get to 8 mana, get Jodsy, protect Jodsy for a turn, and go off the next turn because you just get so much advantage. Typically, like the first Jodsy would be, okay, I'm going to set up I'm going to have tons of mana, usually at 9 mana or more. That turn, so you just cast a bunch of ramp spells that find more ramp spells, and then the next turn that you have Jodsy, then you have like 14 plus mana, and it keeps snowballing. The longer they allow Jodsy to stay out, the more you're gonna. There are many times I've drawn my entire deck, played every card in my deck, and then I'd have primal. Where's the shuffle your graveyard back in your library card, and then I just rinse and repeat. It'd be like the second they'd kill Jodsy multiple times. It just goes back to your hand by discarding a card. And eventually you just grind them out, and that was Jodsy. Jodsy can do like Talmadge's version of Jodsy. He already also had Talmadge. It was more of a combo deck. They could just win. Mine was definitely more of a grind deck, but it was miserable for other people to play against. So I tried not to play too much Jodsy because, yeah, people did not like my 10-hour turns that this often would require. So there you have it. Those are kind of my Commander League decks. And the next video I'm going to show you my ones from Forgotten Realms. So I'm already down to 2 for Forgotten Realms because I played in all of the pre-releases, and we can add all of our cards from pre-releases and other events into our deck. And so every 10 packs, like I said, you have to cut down a card. So we've capped it at 2 until we get more non-Forgotten Realms packs, because basically you end up, if you've done it like how I've done it, you end up with basically 2 of every uncommon, 2 of every common, and you do have the majority of the rares. So you basically get to fill the bulk of the set that you are playing in, and then you start to get to add packs from other sets, because you can't go down to 1-ofs with just one set. There's just not enough cards to build a 100-card deck, and so you do need other cards to kind of get going there. So going to stick with the same strategy and go into Commander Legends at first, and probably to go into like Jumpstart. I think is pretty good. Modern Horizons was pretty good too, but I'll have to show you my Forgotten Realms. I've actually already built more Commander decks with Forgotten Realms than I ended up with this one, because there isn't a lot of overlap between my commanders that I've chosen. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. You really, really, really should try this format out. Put some pressure on your local game store or play with a group of friends. And hell, even if you want to start this out, I can supply you with product. I mean, for pretty cheap to get this going and kind of run it through of how to do it. And we've had a lot of fun. We have a pretty consistent group of, I would say, 5 or 6 players, and we have a couple other ones that show up from time to time. We have a big chunk of people that show up a lot. So we're constantly playing and upgrading. We know what our opponents are doing. You kind of tune your decks towards that. Like, oh, well, I know that. Of course, my rival's Talmadge. He's kind of my rival here, so I always want to try to beat him in everything we do here. Board games, Commander League, whatnot, Flesh and Blood. So pretty fun. I really, really enjoy this way of Magic. Like I said, it still got me to play Magic, so I haven't. You can hear my Debbie Downer, my negative Nancy, with Magic. Still don't like the direction it's gone. Standard 2022 seems okay. Seems wonderful compared to Standard that is rotating, but who knows what the next sets are going to bring to the table. And it actually seems pretty solved at the moment, too. There just seems to be still strictly better cards than other stuff. And like I said, Modern, Commander, their just power levels are way too high. I don't enjoy Magic at that power level. I like it in more tit for tat, more problem solving, more puzzle. Like, this is a puzzle that I got to solve type formats rather than just, throwing out haymakers. So this format is super, super fun, and I highly encourage you to try it out. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. Kevin with the Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.